Hello, and welcome to How Deloitte Uses AI to Simplify Reporting and Increase Value. My name is Chris Skriniak, Machine Learning Segment Lead for Amazon Web Services, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's presentation. When you joined today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or by your computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your audio selection, you can do so by accessing the audio pane in the control panel. From this control panel, you will also have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions panel. We will collect the questions and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Also, at the end of today's event is a brief survey. Please stay connected until the end of the broadcast and submit your feedback because your opinions count. Lastly, the PowerPoint presentation will be available through SlideShare along with this recording of the webinar on YouTube via an email that will be sent 2 to 3 days after the conclusion of this event. So keep your eye out for the follow-up email sent to the address that you provided. So again, welcome to today's live webinar, How Deloitte Uses AI to Simplify Reporting and Increase Value. My name is Chris Skriniak, Machine Learning Segment Lead for Amazon Web Services, and I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. In addition to learning about AWS, we will also hear from Ryan Kurt, VP of Partnerships at Narrative Science, and Sheetal Parikh, Senior Manager of Innovation at Deloitte. You will also learn in this webinar how natural language generation can solve problems around internal reporting, operational efficiency, and regulatory compliance. How Deloitte delivered transformative solutions both internally and to clients on AWS while saving over $600,000. And also how to get started with natural language generation in your organization. So please remember to post your questions in the chat box throughout this presentation as we will review the questions at the end of today's event. So first, about machine learning on AWS. At Amazon, we've been making investments in machine learning for the last 20 years. Our goal now is to put that expertise generated over these decades into the hands of every developer and data scientist. Machine learning is a very broad market, estimated to be $46 billion by the year 2020. Machine learning is pervasive. It answers the simple question, where are predictions creating the most value? Predictions are cheap now with AI, and we're finding their use spread throughout every industry. It's a little top heavy right now in high tech and telecommunications, but we're also seeing many innovations in financial services, healthcare, life sciences, media and entertainment. And there are more than 3,000 startups today that are pursuing AI. So our long heritage of machine learning at Amazon begins with the very familiar personalized recommendations that are familiar with anyone who's bought anything on Amazon. As you know from the experience, we don't simply recommend things that were purchased by other people that bought the same thing. We take a look at your particular interests and behaviors on the website itself. And the more you use the website and the more you use our services, the more accurate our predictions get. We use fulfillment and automation and inventory management with our Kiva robots. We're using drones now to deliver goods through Amazon Prime Air. We're providing voice-driven interactions in a unique pull model, which is unique in computer science through Amazon Alexa. And we only have one of them, but the Amazon Go store in Seattle is absolutely fascinating. You scan your phone when you walk in the door, you choose the products that you want, you walk out of the store and it feels like you were shoplifting, but within a few moments you get a notification that you just paid $6.50 for the sandwich that you picked up. Famously, our Amazon Alexa product, shown here by the Amazon Echo, has been wildly successful in bringing natural language processing into the homes of thousands of our customers. We describe our machine learning offerings at AWS in terms of a stack, and the very top level of that stack, the icing on the cake, if you will, are our computer vision and natural language processing services. Amazon Recognition Video, which was just announced last November at our last reInvent, does video analysis, which will, in near real time, detect objects and activities, detect people, do facial recognition, including celebrity recognition, real-time live streaming. It will moderate content in case your website needs to protect children and other folks that might be sensitive to certain content. And it works using a surface that we advanced called Kinesis streams. As you can see from the single frame here, that not only are objects like a balloon or a gift detected, but also activities such as opening a present. Machine learning can be used in recognition and some of our other services without any knowledge of AI or machine learning in the past. They're all available through REST, like most of the services at AWS. So here's a picture of that cake. The second level on that cake, getting into sort of some of the more platform services, are Amazon SageMaker. Amazon SageMaker is unique in the field of machine learning as it offers the first end-to-end platform for doing data processing, exploration, and really taking machine learning concepts from inception all the way to automated deployment at scale globally. In fact, training services and deployment services that are available through SageMaker can be done either with a single click through the GUI or single commands in Python or the machine learning language of your choice. Other services like AWS Deep Lens provides a development environment for people to create their own computer vision models that might be deployed on, say, a Raspberry Pi or some other IoT device in the field. Of course, we provide some simple logistic regression through Amazon Machine Learning, and then Amazon Spark and EMR provides access to data frames through the Spark service. Amazon Mechanical Turk is human-in-the-loop training. Many machine learning models are accelerated by labeling the data in advance, and frequently you need people to do that task, and that's what Amazon Mechanical Turk is. Finally, sort of the bare metal of the stack are our GPU instances, the fastest ones on the planet with the NVIDIA Volta V100 GPUs. Those are our P3 instances. We also have more affordable P2 instances. And the software services that are available to distribute models out into the field at scale through Amazon Greengrass and through our mobile hub are also really important foundational aspects of deploying machine learning in the field. Many customers are running machine learning on AWS today. In fact, a recent study said that more than 80% of all TensorFlow is running on AWS. And it's important to note that we take an agnostic or a non-dogmatic approach to machine learning. We support many frameworks, and we support almost every kind of approach to machine learning, whether regardless of where it comes from, open source or even private, through our marketplace offerings and through our deep learning AMI, or AMI as we call it. Importantly, out of the thousands of companies that are doing machine learning and academic institutions, research institutions on AWS, we have the ability to once in a while pick a handful of stellar companies, lighthouse accounts that are actually doing exemplary work in their field. And this is the competency program, which is available on AWS for networking, big data, and today, of course, machine learning. And today, two of our partners are available, and I'm going to hand over the platform to them in just a moment. But I do want to point out that both of these clients and partners of ours, both Narrative Science and Deloitte, were our first picks when the machine learning competency was announced. So the program is special. There's just a handful of folks that actually make that cut. And I'm very happy and proud now to hand over the presentation to Ryan Kurt, VP of Partnerships at Narrative Science.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks to our partners at AWS for having us co-host this webinar. And of course, thanks to our friends at Deloitte for joining us. Today, I'll be going through an overview of natural language generation, or NLG. My section will include a definition of NLG, an overview of two different product approaches to NLG, as well as some demos and case studies. So before going into the details on NLG, let's start with a definition of what natural language generation is. It is the process of having a machine, once it has been implemented, automatically analyze data for meaning and insight, and then communicating the most relevant information to business users in the form of natural language. At the simplest level, structured data goes in, and insightful written stories that are indistinguishable from what a human would write come out. Once implemented, this process of writing narratives occurs instantaneously. Data goes in and stories come out in less than a second. So what's the main takeaway from this presentation if you remember one thing? While you might be learning about NLG for the first time today, over our 8 years in business, we have seen a drastic increase in the impact of NLG in the marketplace. A few years ago, the analyst firm Gartner predicted that 20% of all content in businesses would be automated by machines. Think about that. Think of all the places in your organization where people are spending time analyzing data, hopefully accurately, and reporting on what they find. Think of how many people are using dashboards to glean insight from data just to do their jobs better. What would be the impact across your organization if you let technology take on the bulk of that work? How much time would your organization save? And what would you do with the time you got back? Before going into some demonstrations and more product information, let me introduce you to who Narrative Science is as a business. We've been in business for 8 years, and we are primarily focused on servicing large enterprises, as well as technology companies who are integrating NLG into their platforms. Companies like Tableau, MicroStrategy, Sisense, and others. As I mentioned, we do work primarily with large enterprises. Some of these organizations are across every sector, including financial services, insurance, life science, professional services companies like Deloitte, and even federal government institutions like the CIA, NSA, and Department of Defense. Within these organizations, there's two types of constituents that Narrative Science typically helps the most. The first, on the left, are information consumers. This is anyone inside of an organization who needs actionable information found in data to be as effective as possible at their jobs. So basically everyone with a job. On the right-hand side, we have data analysts. These are individuals who are spending a lot of time looking and analyzing data and reporting their findings to broad audiences. Narrative Science has two products in the market today. Each of these is focused on a different type of problem. First, on the left, we have dynamic narratives. This is an out-of-the-box product that can be easily integrated into any existing data, analytics, or BI tools your organization is using today. Dynamic narratives quickly communicates insights from data to any audience. We've seen a lot of success with clients who need an extremely scalable and insightful narrative solution that can be easily integrated into an existing workflow. Everywhere there is a dashboard, Dynamic Narratives is there to help users interpret data automatically, painlessly, and quickly. On the right, we have Quill. This is Narrative Science's powerful and customizable NLG platform that is used to replicate, automate, and scale the way humans report on data today. Quill is very commonly used to replicate and replace repetitive reporting tasks done by humans, or create new, scalable, personalized communication processes that would otherwise not be possible by leveraging humans alone. So now, let's go through a demo of one of these products. I will be showing how dynamic narratives can be integrated into any business intelligence platform. In the demo I'll show the integration with Tableau. Tableau and any BI tool provide a great, clean source of data that is accessible to NLG to automatically analyze and report on. So now when we start the demo, you will see dynamic narratives integrated inside of Tableau. Using this product, users can simply drag and drop the narrative extension into the dashboard and it will automatically analyze the data behind the dashboard and instantly communicate what is going on within the visualization. Any user, regardless of their expertise in the platform, can now automatically understand what's going on in the insights. They can automatically find things they would otherwise not be able to see. And because the risk of misinterpreting or missing important insights goes way down, NLG helps users make better business decisions and take better actions. So jumping back into the presentation, in summary, dynamic narratives can be deployed and integrated out of the box with minimal setup. This allows users to go from data to stories instantaneously. The product enables users to uncover insights not obvious when looking at visualizations alone. Anyone, regardless of their data literacy, can gain insight from data and leverage the data to do their jobs better. So we've seen typically two different types of companies using dynamic narratives as a product. The first on the left, these are data analytics or business intelligence platforms who are looking to increase the adoption of their products and increase the market share. By integrating dynamic narratives, it makes their product easier to use and makes the analysis of data much easier to consume by the users. One example is GeoSpark Analytics. They have a location intelligence system that pulls together vast amounts of data for users to analyze on a particular geographical location. Using dynamic narratives, every user is now able to have an automated real-time analyst directly inside the application, helping them understand what's going on in a particular location in the world. The second type of user are large enterprises like Deloitte who are using dynamic narratives to drastically reduce the time it takes to find insights and then communicate those insights to any audience inside of their organization. So now jumping into Quill, I'll actually walk through a case study of how one of the largest financial institutions, this is a company that pretty much everyone has heard of, how they're using Quill to automate thousands and thousands of reports every single year. This particular company has a team of 50 enterprise risk management analysts that are producing reports on all of the counterparties that they're buying and selling loans to and from. This is an extremely common process in every large financial institution today. Unfortunately, before using tools like Quill, this process was entirely manual and fraught with pain points. At this organization, the analysts were having to produce these reports completely manually. Each report was between 5 to 10 pages long and took about 30% of this individual's time on an annual basis. The process was extremely resource constrained, so even though they had 6,000 lenders they were supposed to write reports on, they weren't able to cover all of those, just given kind of the natural constraints of people. They also had issues with employee retention. The people that were doing this work, frankly, just hated it. They've sent out surveys, and consistently they were told that having to write these reports was one of the least favorite parts of their job. So they wanted to improve employee engagement and retention. And then lastly, the reports that were produced were very inconsistent. So the best analysts and the most senior analysts would frankly just produce better reports than the more junior or analysts who just weren't as good of writers. So their goal was to completely automate this process end to end using Quill, increase employee retention, and then also decrease the time it took every quarter to get these reports done. So now, using Quill, hold for the slide. Now using Quill, this solution is completely automated. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the data that is input into Quill, and then on the right-hand side, the report that is written automatically. Today, Quill is writing over 24,000 counterparty risk reports every single year. The report you see is 100% authored by Quill, and using the powerful features found in the platform, the client was able to replicate 100% of the process that they were using humans for, now using a machine. We were able to take the best process from the best analysts and replicate that at scale. So now the client has a much better, much less expensive process that can handle any scale of reporting. So let's talk about the ROI of this. Just from this one use case, and this organization has dozens of use cases in production, they're saving over $1.5 million a year just from this one solution. All told, they're saving over $10 million a year by using Quill. But Quill's not just about automating financial reports. It can be used for any type of repetitive, data-driven reporting. For example, sales reporting in CPG or retail industries, inventory health reporting, analyzing and reporting on automotive data, and so on and so on. As I mentioned before, 20% of all business reporting is authored by machines today. I'll now pass the ball to Sheetal at Deloitte to discuss how they're playing a large part in this process.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Sheetal Parikh, a senior manager within Deloitte's U.S. innovation team. I'm excited to talk to you about our portfolio of NLG solutions developed in collaboration with Narrative Science. First, I'd like to set the stage briefly to discuss what it is we do within Deloitte's U.S. innovation team. Deloitte's Catalyst Fund is the firm's investment in incubating ecosystem relationships, client solutions, and cross-business platforms in key technology domains such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, NLG, and IoT, to name a few. Essentially, we operate as the firm's internal VC. The activities of Deloitte Catalyst include sensing and scanning the market for the best and brightest startups in these key cognitive technology domains. Narrative Science was an early member of the Deloitte Catalyst. Then we focus on pairing larger companies with the right startup to explore applications for emerging technologies. Use cases are identified, proofs of concepts and prototypes are developed, and pilots are run to evaluate these new solutions. From there, Deloitte acts as an incubator, applying the experiences needed in industry knowledge to scale up these solutions into marketplace offerings. Another area of focus from an innovation perspective for Deloitte is platforms, and specifically cloud. Deloitte's specialized technical knowledge, industry expertise, and strong collaboration with Amazon Web Services helps enable us to integrate the right set of cloud services, map applications and infrastructure, and determine the right migration path and landing zone. We also have comprehensive experience in helping our clients solve all their tech migration issues, such as licensing challenges, target tech stack requirements, and cloud-native application needs, to name a few. At Deloitte, there are over a couple thousand folks in the global cloud practice, and in parallel, we've built out a community of 300 Deloitte data scientists to expand the machine learning capability in-house. The cloud practice focuses across the spectrum on migrations, big data analytics, call center as a service, as well as creating Alexa-enabled products like DAssist, as well as industry platforms. In addition, Deloitte has attained AWS competency in the following: life sciences, SAP, migration, government, financial services, security, and as Chris mentioned earlier, machine learning. Now I'd like to dive deeper into the Deloitte and NLG narrative. We've been collaborating with Narrative Science since 2016. It's really a complementary relationship where Narrative Science is providing the NLG platform and Deloitte brings our data wrangling and analytics and implementation experience along with our deep industry knowledge. We've conducted approximately 16 proof of concepts across all of our different business lines, including audit, tax, consulting, and risk and financial advisory. I'd like to speak about two products in particular, which are live in production. The first one is Syntax, which was developed for our tax practice. The tax practice at Deloitte processes hundreds of thousands of tax returns each year. Due to the high volume of returns, one-on-one communication is limited to a subset of clients. With Syntax, we're able to provide every single client with a consultative and personalized tax guidance memo fueled by the Deloitte proprietary tax engine library. What is being ingested by the NLG platform is the tax returns, and what we're able to do is create this customized tax memo advising on proactive planning strategies and tips. The benefit that we've seen is that we're now able to personalize communication for all of our clients at scale, but then also tangentially, we've been able to accelerate training for our junior tax practitioners who may not know what clients would find the most important and how the tax insight fits into the broader story. We've also been able to build out this solution into the tax practitioner's workflow to ensure stickiness. every quarter, we're expanding the rule set within the Deloitte tax engine that is powering the content to ensure that the content does not get stale and it remains dynamic. For instance, the next iteration is going to be on tax reform. The next product I want to highlight is called Actuarial Edge. And what Actuarial Edge does is that it auto-generates parts of the general insurance internal actuarial memo with the goal of reducing manual reporting and improving time to market while improving consistency of communication. What we're ingesting into the platform is current actuarial liability data, such as workers' compensation and self-insurance reserve, as well as past year data to perform retrospective and driver analysis. And then what's being outputted in the engine is an automated memo that contains substantiation to different summary tables, which contain variable narratives for financial items, as well as a substantiation to retrospective procedures and analysis, such as actual versus expected insights, as well as year-over-year changes and definitions. What we've been able to benefit from this solution is we've been able to reduce time spent on this repetitive reporting at about 4,000 hours per year. We've been able to reinvest those hours to more strategic tasks. And lastly, we've been able to improve the time to market and consistency of the communication. On the client side, we're seeing a lot of applicability and interest from life sciences, FSI, federal, hospitality, and pharmaceuticals. And lastly, from a functional perspective, we're seeing tremendous activity within supply chain, compliance, operations, and finance transformation. The next set of slides are focused on finance, specifically on how to identify opportunities for NLG, common use cases for NLG in finance, as well as a couple of case studies which demonstrate how we've been able to create and implement end-to-end NLG solutions, which resulted in significant cost savings, faster time to market, and improved quality. There's been a strategic shift over the last few years of how finance executives are becoming strategic advisors to the board and focusing on business partnering efforts, specifically around decision-making, instead of being operationally focused. Companies are also enhancing service delivery models through automation with management reporting based on level of effort and variability. The pyramid on the left shows the traditional view, where the focus historically was on operating and data processing, while the new model highlights the shift to generating the business insights to support the decision-making process. According to Deloitte's in-depth survey of over 600 senior finance professionals, most organizations aren't quite there yet. In almost half of the businesses surveyed, finance spends the majority of its time creating and updating reports, despite wanting to spend more time on strategic business-facing activities. Those familiar with typical financial reports won't be surprised by this. Finance is wrought with ever-increasing amounts of data, which needs to be analyzed and reported on regular cadences to various audiences, each requiring different levels of interpretation. Due to increasing demands for analytics and reporting within finance, there is significant opportunity for NLG. The journey begins with selecting the right use case. When we're helping clients brainstorm and identify the optimal use case, we're looking at a number of factors which are summarized on the slide. To start, you can ask these 7 guiding questions to assess if NLG technology can replicate or enhance the current reporting process and if the impact justifies developing a use case. Is the data structured, i.e. an XLS, CSV, JSON, or database? Is the process ongoing, requiring the manual generation or refresh reports, memos, or dashboards? Does the expected output correspond to established methodologies and rule-based outputs? Does the reporting occur frequently and require inputs from multiple sources? Is the use case repeatable, i.e. industry-specific or organizationally agnostic? Is there an opportunity to aggregate and analyze the data, historical and real-time? and can further insights be derived by methodically automating the process? Essentially, we want to find the use cases where the juice is worth the squeeze. Here is a high-level overview of different applications of NLG in finance. Some key examples include flash reporting, sales and margin reports, profit and loss reports, and spend reports, to name a few. I now like to walk you through an example of a case study where the buyer was a CFO and essentially wanted to automate the process of monthly financial reporting, which contained over 40 different touch points with different analysts globally. So not only was the process of coordination extremely time consuming, to have this many hands touching the output made the process extremely complex and expensive. What we were able to do through the use of the NLG platform was we were able to automate the entire process. And not only were we able to automate the process, we're also able to tweak the output based on the persona who's receiving the output. So the C-suite had a very specific tone and diction associated with the specific output, where more of the ad hoc requester had a different output generated while using the same underlying data source. And lastly, it's another case study around profit and loss reporting, where we're able to automate business area performance reports that describe how different businesses and service lines are functioning based on revenue and costs and varied on different reader personas. So this is something that was developed for an internal finance function, and this generated over $600,000 in savings through the use of NLG. Thank you very much. Now back to Chris.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. Now it's time for us to get into some questions. Just to remind everybody, there is a question panel on the right-hand side of your screen here. So if you do have questions, feel free to chime in now. I'm going to start with the first one here that came in, which is simply, could you please explain the difference between natural language processing, natural language understanding, and natural language generation again? So that's NLP, NLU, and NLG respectively. Ryan, I think that's yours.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Happy to answer that question. So starting with NLG, which we already went through, that of course is the process of having a machine automatically analyze data and then summarize what it's found using natural language. Conversely, natural language processing, or NLP, is the process of analyzing natural language and then parsing natural language into machine readable format, so natural language into data. And then lastly, natural language understanding is the process of actually truly understanding the meaning and the context of natural language and having a machine automatically know how to parse that information into meaning. So the example I use is, I was actually using my Alexa this morning and I said, play Bob Dylan. So with natural language processing, NLP will know that play is a verb and Bob Dylan's a person. But with NLU, the system knows that I actually want to play a song by an artist. It knows that Bob Dylan is a singer-songwriter, and I want it to play an album of songs. And so that's really the difference of kind of adding an additional layer of intelligence. And Chris, I would actually put it back on you to see if there's any kind of additional insight on NLU and NLP, given Amazon's so focused on the Alexa platform.
Well, I'll simply say that this is an area of extraordinary breakthroughs and research at the moment. If you take a look at some of the ways in which language generation is now coming to the fore, it's pretty clear that these are going to be standard applications and standard interfaces just 2 or 3 years out. So the fact that you guys are on the cutting edge here is really exemplary. And I have to say, when I came out to Chicago the first time and saw the product, I was blown away. The next question here, and I guess that was more opinion than fact-based, but I hope you don't mind. The next question here is, for your dynamic narratives product, do you already need to use a business intelligence tool?
Yeah, another good question. So I would actually broaden the definition from business intelligence tool to really any data and analytics tool. So we integrate within, tools that you can vend and purchase like Tableau or Click or MicroStrategy, but we also work with organizations where they've built their own dashboarding tool or their own analytics and BI tool. So anywhere you already have one of those workflows or tools set up, that's where Dynamic Narratives is a great fit.
Got it. And this is sort of a companion question. When should I use Quill and when should I use Dynamic Narratives?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Quill is much more focused on taking a process that a company is doing today, where it's a very repetitive, high volume type of reporting need. And there's a very big focus on needing the language to be exactly the way the organization wants it, or needing the ability to communicate to different audiences in different ways. So Quill is extremely customizable and tends to be focused on like process automation. Dynamic Narratives is really focused on helping people get insights from data very, very quickly without really having to know much about the data to begin with. So Quill does take a bit of time to set up. We have to actually teach Quill a lot about the type of communication and the type of sort of information you want to communicate. Dynamic Narrative, there's almost no configuration. So if you have a very large deployment of BI tools or platforms with dashboards, and the data underlying is very different. You might have hundreds of different types of dashboards or types of analysis you would want to do. Dynamic Narratives is perfect for that because it already understands high level how to analyze pretty much any type of data, whereas Quill does need some setup and is much more pointed at specific processes. To answer your question, Chris?
Yes, and then following up here, are Dynamic Narratives already integrated into products like Tableau and Click?
Yeah, they are. So we've got integrations into around 10 different platforms today. So Tableau I already showed today. ClickSense is another. Sisense is another one of our partners. And then MicroStrategy is probably the fifth that we get the most notoriety for. And then Microsoft Power BI, we also have an integration.
The next question up here is about the Russian language in particular, but I'd like to broaden it to say what sort of language support do you have, and then maybe help this particular person by saying what kind of interest or roadmap is there for Russian in particular.
Yeah, this is probably like a top 5 question we always get is what languages we support. So today we support English because most of our customers are in North America, Europe, or Australia. So really it's been driven by kind of the business needs of our customers. We've really been focused on English. We have gotten a number of requests to extend to primarily other Romance languages in Europe, like Spanish, French Canadian, and German. But our roadmap is sort of in flux at this point as far as when those languages will come to fruition. It's really just driven by the demand we see in the market. And today, we've been able to sort of continue our growth rates, just focusing primarily on large North American and European companies.
And do you have any kind of published timeline or beta user group?
So at this point, we don't have a published timeline on other languages, but we do have a published roadmap on other feature sets that we share with customers and partners.
Okay, great. So a lot of folks are asking if the deck will be distributed, and the answer is yes. Look for the links in your email with the address that you used to sign up for this webinar. Also, the question here is whether that list of questions by Sheetal is available. That was a superb list of questions, and that will be included, Sheetal. Do you have any more comments on that particular list?
No, we'll make sure to include it, but that really is the great jumping off point to make sure that you're identifying the right use case. So glad you found those questions helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure many will. There's a few Amazon questions here. One is Amazon machine learning used for natural language generation or other non-ML AWS services that are used? I guess there's two ways to read that. One is, are you using them in your product, Ryan? But I'll just say that we don't have any managed services on AWS right now that do NLG. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so today, all of the intellectual property narrative science has developed is leveraging kind of our own development work. We're not currently using any AWS machine learning. However, I do know that in the future we're looking at imparting more true ML into the platform. But today, we're not using any of AWS's machine learning. Got it.
Okay, next question is for AWS. Can recognition be used as a quality control tool? I'm going to stop short of saying a hard no. Recognition is, but it all depends on the use case. I think the more common use cases are certainly object identification, spontaneously improving the kind of content that is served through content management systems. It's being used for two-factor authentication. So when somebody knows a password or hits a code on the side of a building, we can identify the person. But quality control per se, I mean, that's pretty broad. And anomaly detection, the sort of things that I've seen, especially in APAC, where you're actually tuning for particular incidents on a manufacturing line with an IoT device, that's not a standard use case for recognition. All right, so next up, it was mentioned that in the financial use cases, rules were managed. How much of the natural language generation is done with deep learning versus expert systems or statistical analysis? And the main point of the question here is how much deep learning is used?
Yeah, so today, this is Ryan, obviously. Today, we're focused on more of a statistical analysis approach where rules are set up and sort of default and analytics packages are used to kind of back up the NLG that's produced. So we're not using deep learning today, although we are obviously aware that deep learning is one approach to NLG. What we've seen is it really does not work for enterprise use cases, given, especially in heavily regulated industries, the client needs to know exactly why the system wrote what it wrote. And so our systems do provide a high level of traceability all the way from the language that was written back to sort of the logic and decisions that were made to surface that language, and then ultimately back to the data that was analyzed to actually produce the natural language. So yes, deep learning is one approach you can use for NLG, but we've seen it much more on the consumer side of, if you're going to order a pizza or you're going to ask a question around, something that's much more focused on like a search, it's giving better answers to users on that. But within the enterprise and within commercial use cases, we've seen almost zero applications of deep learning for NLG in enterprises.
Well, that's very timely considering GDPR. Can you explain at a high level the process of training the system to analyze your data? And the comment here is, I'm assuming these products don't just work out of the box.
Yes, I would challenge that second statement, which is we have two products, as I've talked about. The first answer with dynamic narratives, there actually is no training whatsoever. The system has been set up to understand typical types of analysis that are domain agnostic, like time series analysis or part of whole or actual versus benchmark. So there's a whole set of analyses that we've set up in dynamic narratives where there actually is no training at all. So one of the benefits of using the product is if one of you were to call our inside sales team right now, within 5 minutes, you could start using dynamic narratives out of the box. With Quill, the process is a bit longer, and I would liken it to the process of training an analyst. So you give Quill sort of the type of output or the type of reports that you'd like to sort of mimic, and then we sort of reverse engineer the process of how you would go from data to analysis to the information that's actually communicated. So that process can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for simpler use cases, up to 8 to 10 weeks for more complex use cases. But we really liken it to the process of training an analyst. So on the client side, we really work closely with people who produce the reports today and subject matter experts.
So the next question is about implementation. Can you give us a sense of timeline for implementation, and what is the ongoing support model for changes?
Yeah, it's another great question. So implementation has a couple of phases. The first is very typical phase that you would do with any sort of platform where you're analyzing data, which is ETL and data aggregation. So for most clients, they've already done this work because they use BI platforms or their own kind of internal dashboarding tools. But at any rate, you do have to get your data in a place where you can leverage any sort of machine like narrative sciences. And that's where companies like Deloitte really help clients get their data in the right format. But once you provide the product, Quill, with a clean data set, really the configuration process is fairly straightforward. As long as we have a really good target of what the client's looking for, that process can take only a couple of weeks. And then as far as ongoing maintenance, it really kind of runs the gamut. We have some solutions clients are using where it's really set it and forget it. We've had clients using Quill for 7 or 8 years now. And because we spent time on the front end working with them to kind of iterate and tune Quill, it's been running at steady state for years without any sort of updates. We also have a number of use cases with clients where just by the nature of the reporting we're doing, the type of data you want to analyze might change over time. And so we typically have quarterly update schedules where our clients can log into Quill and request different changes and sort of give feedback into Quill. And then we go back and make those changes, which take anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days. So ongoing support, I would say, happens with about 50% of our clients, and that's aided by our very large and expert level professional services team.
Sheila, I wonder if you could share a little bit of your experience with timeline and effort to get to market with NLG.
Sure. We can talk about our own kind of Deloitte specific implementations. We spent about 3 to 6 months, I would define as experimentation phase, where we spent the time with our business line practitioners as well as with narrative science to understand the data that was being ingested, the data model, what the specific rules and methodology was of analysis, and then lastly, how this would be used and what the target output should look and read like. And once that was defined, both of these use cases that I touched upon were definitely more on the complex side. And so once we made sure that the data model and the business rules and the output were kind of locked down, we moved towards kind of that implementation phase. Because we were taking the existing application and syntax in particular and integrating it into an existing tool that was used by our tax practitioners, we essentially took our kind of process and worked with their developers to kind of integrate this from an end-to-end perspective. And I'm going to say from the time we started the experiment to when phase 1 was deployed was about 12 months. But that also includes rigorous validation and kind of compliance and quality reviews. So that's really around the syntax timeline because we were building into an existing application. For Actuarial Edge, we created our own kind of UI to really be the interface which our actuarial specialists used to generate the content. And that had a faster timeline because we're building a new product from scratch. And that took about 8 months from experimentation to deployment.
Okay, fantastic. Simple question here. Is there a free trial?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So depending on the product that customers are looking to use, whether it's Dynamic Narratives or Quill, we have offered free trials in the past. So with Dynamic Narratives, if you actually went to our website today and you were a ClickSense user, for example, you could actually do a self-guided trial just by downloading the application off the website. For Quill, because the process is a bit more customized for the type of needs of the client, we do proof of concepts at no cost. We call them sort of custom demos to prove whether or not the system can do the reporting that the client needs. But beyond that, the pilots and any sort of production use of the system, those are paid engagements.
Are you seeing Quill being used for asset management and financial market commentaries?
Yeah, you almost are reading my brain. So that is one of the more repeatable use cases we've seen in market. So of the top 20 asset managers in the world by assets managed, we work with 12 of the top 20. And the use cases range from automating portfolio commentary. So every quarter, these companies have to produce reports for clients, for the website, and also regulators. And Quill can do that work in less than a second once it's been set up. We also do trading desk recaps and investment research reports, and obviously different types of risk-based reporting that I showed earlier. But financial markets and especially asset managers, those have been kind of our earliest adopters. So going back about 5 years, a lot of our earliest customers came from those industries.
So finance is an important vertical, no doubt. The next question is, are the phrases generated by NLG template-based? If so, are they different from vertical to vertical?
Yeah, so template is a four-letter word in narrative science. So again, the answer sort of depends on the type of product you're talking about. For dynamic narratives, the language is automatically generated out of the box directly from the system that's backing up the dynamic narratives product. For Quill, it's much more of a rules-based engine where there is control over what the user wants to say. So it's definitely not a template, but it's much more of a intelligent way of choosing what you want to say when certain conditions are true and when other conditions are not true. So we don't use the word template, but it is a system where you do have a high level of flexibility on what you want Quill to say.
Okay, so there are quite a few questions about integration with other BI tools. And I know you did mention it earlier, and rather than list all of those that were asked here, can you mention briefly who you integrate with and point to where you can get more information on your website or from other areas?
Yeah, so we work with most of the large BI platforms today. I already mentioned Tableau and Qlik and Microsoft Power BI and Sisense. All of the information over who narrative science integrates with is actually on our website. And when we follow up with the slide, I would recommend we just include maybe a link to that part of our site because it will list out all of our partners there. But we do have a couple of ways we work with BI platforms, and I just mentioned that because people on this call can really help drive this. Some platforms are OEMing the technology where they will integrate narratives directly inside the platform so that any user can automatically use them. So an example of that would be MicroStrategy and also Sisense. And then organizations like Tableau and Qlik and Microsoft, they have an open ecosystem where partners like Narrative Science can build the front end and build an integration directly there. So you can find all these extensions on our website, but then each of our partners, it's also on their websites as well. So that's a good takeaway, and we'll make sure that we make finding that information as quickly as possible. But if you have a BI platform that I haven't mentioned, if we're not working with them today, I would recommend calling your rep or calling their head of product because we would love to integrate with them.
The next question is once again regarding costs. The question is it cost effective for small business? And the asker here also notes that there are no comparable open source solutions.
Yeah, so I can take that one again. We do say that we focus primarily on the enterprise, and that's because a very high percentage of our revenue comes from the largest companies in the world. That said, over the years, we have worked with organizations where I think our smallest client has only 4 people that work there, and the reason it was cost effective for them is they needed to produce a high level of reports, a high volume of reports, and their options were they were going to hire people to do that, or they were going to hire Quill to do that work. And so even though the average implementation cost of a Quill solution is over $100,000 per year, that was much, much less expensive and much more of a safe and scalable solution than hiring analysts. Analysts leave. Some analysts aren't very good at their job. And also a technology doesn't get sick. For companies like that, hiring a machine was a much better kind of fit. But we do have a number of smaller organizations where the decision really wasn't to augment existing people's time or existing people's work, but it was really do I hire people or do I just leverage machines? And so I think because we fit into this space of we can pretty much scale to any level of reporting or any level of data-driven communication. As long as a company has a centralized data source and really has a business need for automated reporting, there's a great fit for our technology. And as far as, is there an open source library that can be used for enterprise level natural language generation? We're not aware of any in the marketplace that's being used today. We've really spent a lot of time building in features around what big enterprises need to use a product like this. So I mentioned things like automated traceability back to the logic and the decisions that were made to surface a piece of content or a story. That's become table stakes for us, where every government entity, every insurance company, every life science or healthcare company, they absolutely need to know why a machine wrote what it wrote, and that's a feature we've had to embed inside of our platforms. Other examples are, we've developed a system where, while most of our clients, prefer to run it in the cloud in AWS, there are customers that need to have a hybrid model where the exact same, authoring engine exists in the cloud as well as on-premise for certain needs. And so we've made it very, very easy to automatically deploy our technology in pretty much any secure, insecure, any sort of environment. So there's a whole list of other things I would go through, but we've really found that any sort of open source or do-it-yourself homegrown solutions, they're not really designed for enterprise or business use.
Well, we just have time for one more question, and I'd like to stick with security. At AWS, security is always our top priority, and we provide more mechanisms than you can find anywhere to keep data private and secure in the cloud, encrypted both in transit and at rest. The question here is, how does natural language generation manage to identify confidential information from the data it's reading and make sure that it does not expose it to the wrong user?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the solution to that problem is actually one that takes place sort of earlier in the process, where depending on where the natural language generation system is deployed, that really dictates the level of confidential information that you can even send into the platform. So we have customers where if they're running extremely secure information, they're probably doing that in a private cloud instance. And so for us, we would need to know that at the onset of the engagement, and then make sure that contractually speaking, they're only sending data to that endpoint that they're supposed to be sending. And so on our end, we really sort of tackle that during the QA and configuration phase, so that as our professional services team is working with the client team configuring Quill, we fully understand the level of security of the data we're handling. And so it's not something that's handled in-app, but it is something that is very, very clearly defined at the front end of any engagement.
Ryan, Kurt, VP of Partnerships for Narrative Science, Sheetal Parikh, Senior Manager of Innovation at Deloitte. Thank you both so much, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Please remember to stay connected and complete the brief survey at the conclusion of this webinar. We look forward to supporting you in your current and future projects. Thank you again, and have a great day.